United Nations chief fix warming or face oblivion. That means extinction. Warning issued at climate talks where U.S. is resisting all targets. Bali, Indonesia. The human race faces oblivion if it fails to confront global warming. Yes, that means total extinction. The UN Secretary General said Tuesday as delegates to the UN Climate Conference haggled over a new document strengthening a call for deeper cuts in greenhouse gas emissions by rich nations. The UN Secretary General arrived on the resort island of Bali to preside over the final days of the 2-week conference, which aims to set an agenda and deadline for talks that will lead to a climate change pact to succeed the Kyoto Protocol in 2012. The UN Secretary General urged quick action as negotiators worked on a final conference decision document. A version obtained by the Associated Press on Tuesday included guidelines for industrialized countries to cut their emissions overall by 2020 by between 25% and 40%. The situation is so desperately serious that any delay could push us past the tipping point, beyond which the ecological, financial, and human costs would increase dramatically, the UN Secretary General said in a speech to delegates. We are at a crossroads, he added. One path leads to a comprehensive climate change agreement, the other to oblivion, extinction. The choice is clear. The latest draft of the document, to be released at the conference's conclusion Friday, included a new mention of quantified national emission limitation and reduction commitments for industrialized countries. Yes, it's going to cost some money. Yes, it's going to take some effort on nations' part, and all the nations, especially the ones that have the most money. Yes, we need government at the highest levels to start working on this immediately. Unfortunately, in the United States, I'm afraid we have the wrong president to do anything about that. And oh, yes, of course, next year is an election year. Don't see much getting done. That could be the tipping point by delaying and always delaying. Commitment could be an obstacle. The United States rejected the 1997 Kyoto-Pact in part because it included mandatory emissions cuts. And Washington has supported only voluntary targets. No, voluntary is not going to work. The word commitment, which was not in an earlier draft obtained over the weekend, was likely to draw opposition from the U.S. delegation. The United States has publicly opposed mentions of targets or emissions cuts guidelines in the Bali document, arguing that it was premature to state goals at such an early date. Negotiations for a post-Kyoto Pact are to last at least 2 years. That's even too long. UN officials, however, say the numbers are only guidelines to be hashed out in coming talks. The European Union, developing countries, and environmentalists have argued strenuously in favor of including general goals in the Bali Declaration. What's wrong with that? The latest draft included dozens of changes from the earlier version, suggesting that negotiators were far from reaching agreement on a final wording. In past years, talks on the declaration on the last day have dragged on into the night the next morning. The European Commissioner for Environment said emissions guidelines were crucial to prevent global temperatures from exceeding 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, over pre-industrial levels. the European Union has committed itself to 20% to 30% reductions below 1990 levels by 2020. We need this range of reductions by developed countries, he told reporters Tuesday. Science tells us that these reductions are necessary. Logic requires that we listen to science. Australia, despite its sudden embrace of the Kyoto-Pact, has shied away from supporting the emissions goals yet, saying it must await the conclusion of a study sometime next year. Another delay upon another delay. Always delaying to do anything about climate change. And yes, climate change is real. Doesn't really matter if people think it's not. It is. The facts back it up. The science says so. Logic tells us so. Yes. We recognize the need for an interim target, said Penny Wong, Australia's Minister for Climate Change. We have a clear process of scientific and economic analysis to determine what that interim target should be. Canada and Japan also oppose inclusion of the suggested figures. Environmentalists urge them to reconsider quickly. This is not the direction we need to be going in. The stakes are much too high for this kind of political games and more political games. In one of the first concrete results of the talks, negotiators said Tuesday they had agreed on the oversight structure of a fund to help developing countries build seawalls and take other steps to adapt to the effects of climate change. Delegates decided to let the Global Environment Faculty, a UN body that helps developing countries with environmental projects, run the fund, though some countries accuse the faculty of being slow to distribute money. The GEF has only about $60 million. That's nothing compared to what they really need to have. Although the World Bank has estimated some tens and tens of billions of dollars a year will be needed at least for adaptation. Nothing has been done at Bali to develop new sources of revenue. Actually, it could take trillions and trillions of dollars. Yes, some dark days are coming. Because climate change is an accelerating thing. Ever going faster, ever accelerating. People don't even know how much it's really accelerating, but it is. The struggle over targets coincided with the 10th anniversary of the signing of the Kyoto Accord on December 11, 1997 in Japan. The Kyoto-Pact requires 36 industrial nations to reduce carbon dioxide and other industrial, transportation, and agricultural gases blamed for global warming by an average 5% below 1990 levels in the next 5 years. The U.S. is the only major industrial nation to reject Kyoto. Without the U.S., there can be no climate change pact. None at all. It won't do any good. The United States emits just a huge amount of emissions into the air, into the atmosphere. Without the U.S. in the Bali Pact, or any pact at all, there's nothing to do but just wait. Anyway, this is why the Lord God Almighty is coming back. There's no other logical conclusion to this story. Because the human race don't see it. I don't see it they're going to get it done. Not in time. Because time is of the essence. More signs of the last days, and there are many. Multitude upon multitudes. Period.